Lying in Parliament should be a criminal offence. It cannot be right that accusing a member of lying in the Commons leads to a greater punishment than the lying itself. A new law that holds politicians to account at Holyrood and Westminster will help to protect democracy, holding to account those with the power to affect our daily lives. In a world of fake news and increasing tensions, it is crucial that our democratic political system is built upon truth, accountability, and respect.
And Bethany joins us to debate her arguments with Peter Cardell, who is a former special advisor to Conservative cabinet ministers. Thank you both for joining us. And Bethany, do you think there would be much public support for this move?
Yeah, well, there already is. So a recent survey showed that 76% of the public would be in favour of making this legislation, and that's across both sides of the political spectrum as well, with 84% Labour voters and 75% Conservatives. And it's not just public support as well, it's also from politicians themselves who are looking to hold each other to account. Back in April, there was the six leaders of the opposition parties, including the SNP, who put forward a letter to the Speaker of the House, basically stating through the Nolan Principles and Ministerial Code that politicians can't be untruthful.
OK. Peter, you've worked at the highest level of politics. Would you support making lying in Parliament a criminal offence?
I absolutely agree with Bethany that there needs to be truth, accountability and respect at the very heart of politics. But I don't think you do that by making this a criminal offence. And the question, I suppose, the logical end of that argument, I suppose, is are we going to get politicians in prison for lying? Are they going to be alongside rapists and murderers who've really done something very, very serious? Also, I suppose the question is, what is a lie? Did Boris Johnson lie when he said in the 2019 manifesto that he wouldn't raise taxes, for example? He's gone against that this week and has said very publicly that he's going against it and he's changing his policy because the circumstances have changed, because the pandemic, in his view anyway, means that more money is needed for the NHS and the care system. So I think politicians need that flexibility. And in terms of accountability, I think there is a lot of accountability. We're falling over ourselves for referendums in the last few years, not just up there in Scotland, but also on Brexit, of course, as well as the fact that there have been a number of elections and many politicians, including politicians who have lied, have been thrown out. OK, a couple of points there, Bethany, but the first one, how would you determine who was lying? What is a lie?
There is obviously a practical side to this, and I'm not saying that we should throw a politician in jail for a little porcupine in Parliament, but I think there does need to be some sort of independent body who is independent of any current sitting government, still public sector though, for transparency's sake, that is able to basically dictate if a statement is actual fact or not when it is told in Parliament. So if you look at Peter Stevanovich's video that's currently got about 25 million views online, he literally goes through and shows direct statements from Boris Johnson, for instance, in Parliament and says this is factually untrue. So that's, I think, where we need to start. And it's not necessarily about criminalising it and throwing them in jail, but some sort of sanction that goes on their public record, some sort of penalisation, some sort of unlimited fine even would be a good boundary to start at.
Peter, what's your response to that? Some kind of independent body that can actually prove whether or not a lie is taken place?
Well, I think we have a number of independent bodies already that, as Bethany talked about there, the Nolan Principles in Public Life, the Committee on Standards on Public Life, for example. We have propriety and ethics within the Cabinet Office, for example, in terms of how ministers act and so on. But I think there's a wider point here, and I think the wider point is if we keep presupposing that politicians are liars, if we keep calling them liars, if we get sort of down and dirty into that kind of language and throw around these kind of allegations. I'm not saying there aren't politicians that are liars, of course there are, but if you simply have this kind of street fight, it becomes less the House of Commons and more kind of the Queen Vic. And I think the wider point is that we want to get really good people into politics. We want to get the best people into politics. But if we keep saying they're all liars, terrible people on the meg, only in it for themselves, then we're going to get the wrong people in politics. I worked in politics for about 3.5 years for 4 cabinet ministers in Westminster, and I can genuinely say, and I'm a pretty cynical person, about 95% of the people I worked with in politics, both elected and unelected, were very, very good people who wanted to change the country and make it better for people, whatever their perspective. And I'm talking about Conservatives, Labour, SNP and others. But if we keep demonising them and tarring them all with the same brush and not realising that there are good and bad shop assistants, GPs, TV presenters, journalists and MPs. Of course there are, but the vast majority of people are pretty well intentioned, and I want to be optimistic.
But Peter, you're saying 95% aren't liars. You're saying 5% of them are.
There are definitely some politicians on the make. There's no doubt about that. But that's the same, I think, in every profession. And I was a journalist for 10 years before I went into politics, and I know that's definitely the case in journalism as well. Although I'm sure definitely not at STV.
Bethany, what's your response to that? He's saying, by and large, they're truthful, and you're demonising by even suggesting this.
I think, when you were publicising your book, you even said yourself that there is a shady underside to the world of politics. So you know better than anyone the sort of darker side of the morals and the judgment and the untruthfulness. And I think it's incredibly crucial to note that. Sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. Let's go back to Peter and say, the level of trust in politicians isn't great at the moment, and some people think that Boris Johnson does tell lies from time to time. How do we go about restoring trust then?
Well, there are 2 points there. One, I think we just have to attract the best people into politics. We need to say to people, it is a noble profession to try to lead your country. And look, a lot of people do make quite a lot of sacrifices when they go into politics. There are people who some of the politicians I work for rarely see their family, for example. They often live a long way away from home. Obviously, a lot of Scottish politicians spend a lot of time in the week where they don't see their family, for example. But I think in terms of trust in our institutions, that's a wider problem. It's not just about politics. That has gone down a lot in recent years, and that's a wider thing for society to try to look at properly, I think.
And we'll give you the final word, Bethany.
Well, I was going to say, I think that it's all good and well saying that that maybe 95% of politicians are good people, but at the end of the day, one in 4 people in the public who have been surveyed think that no politician is ever truthful. And when you do hold a position in public office or anywhere in the public sector where you have a responsibility for other people, you have to understand that you are held to a higher standard than people from other workplaces, and that's just standard. That's going to be part and parcel of the job of a politician, is that you have to tell the truth, because you should have the respect for the millions of people who have voted you in with the responsibility of looking after their everyday life.
Okay, and we'll have to leave it there, but great debate. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us.